Vampire King saw a waitress carry his disabled daughter. Then he broke the blood law himself. The crown creates the monster, they whispered in the dark corridors of the Obsidian court, but the silence creates the man. Edwin Stormwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of a city that didn't know he existed. Rain streaked the glass like tears he had forgotten how to shed. He checked his pocket watch, an antique thing of silver and dread. "She is gone, my liege," Harrison Valecrest said, his voice trembling. "Princess Rowena has vanished from the secure wing." Edwin didn't scream. He didn't break the glass. He simply turned, his eyes effectively ending the storm outside, to start a new one within the room. Then find her. Before the hunger does. The neon sign of the Midnight Fork flickered with an agitated buzz, casting a sickly pink glow over the wet asphalt. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour that belonged to the lonely, the lost, and the hunted. Felicity Moreland wiped down the counter, the smell of stale coffee and bleach clinging to her uniform like a second skin. Her back ached. It was a dull, throbbing reminder of the double shifts she'd been pulling to pay off her mother's medical debts, debts that had outlived the woman who incurred them. Felicity wasn't living. She was merely surviving, moving from one hour to the next like a clockwork doll with a rusting gear. "Order up for table 4, the cook grunted, sliding a plate of grease-laden eggs onto the pass. "On it," Felicity sighed, pushing a stray lock of chestnut hair behind her ear. By 3:30 a.m., the diner was empty save for a trucker sleeping in a booth and the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the roof. Felicity took the trash bag out the back door, bracing herself against the gust of wind that threatened to knock her over. The alleyway was a canyon of shadows, smelling of wet cardboard and city grime. She tossed the bag into the dumpster and turned to leave, but a sound stopped her. It was faint. A whimper. Not an animal. Too melodic. Too desperate. Felicity squinted into the gloom behind a stack of wooden pallets. "Hello? Is someone there?" The rain hammered down, drowning out the city noise. But the whimper came again. Felicity stepped closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. She moved a rotting crate aside and gasped. Huddled in the mud, wrapped in a cloak of fabric so fine it looked like woven moonlight, was a child. A girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with pale skin that seemed to glow in the dark and hair the color of spun silver. "Oh my God," Felicity whispered, dropping to her knees, ignoring the filth soaking into her jeans. "Hey, sweetie. Are you okay?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were violet, impossibly vivid, terrified, and ancient. She shivered violently, her lips blue. When she tried to move, she let out a cry of pain. Her legs lay at awkward angles, utterly still, as if they didn't belong to her. I can't," the girl rasped. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gale. They stopped working. The shadows took them. "It's okay. I've got you," Felicity said, instinct overriding fear. She didn't question the girl's strange clothes or the terrifying beauty of her eyes. She saw a child freezing to death. "Do not touch me," the girl whispered, though she leaned toward Felicity's warmth. "I am dangerous." "You're a kid," Felicity said firmly, "and you're freezing." The girl tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled and gave way. She collapsed into the mud, sobbing. It was the sound of pure defeat. Felicity didn't hesitate. She scooped the child up. The girl was surprisingly heavy, dense like marble, yet fragile. As Felicity held her, a strange sensation washed over her, a static charge, like standing too close to a lightning strike. The girl gasped, burying her face in Felicity's neck. "Hold on," Felicity murmured, adjusting her grip. The girl's legs dangled uselessly, dead weight against Felicity's hip. I'm taking you inside. I have a car. We're going to a hospital." "No hospital!" the girl shrieked, clutching Felicity's uniform. "Please! They will find me! The bad man! Leopold! He will find me!" Felicity froze. Leopold. It sounded like a name from a history book, not a kidnapping suspect. But the terror in the girl's voice was real. Okay, no hospital yet. My car is right there. Let's just get you out of the rain." Felicity trudged through the slick mud, the girl's weight straining her tired arms. She reached her battered Honda Civic, fumbling for her keys with one hand while keeping a tight hold on the child. Suddenly, the alleyway was flooded with blinding white light. The roar of engines filled the air. Two sleek, matte black SUVs screeched to a halt, blocking both ends of the alley. The headlights cut through the rain, turning the falling drops into diamonds. Felicity clutched the girl tighter, backing up against her car. "Stay down," she whispered, though there was nowhere to go. Doors opened. Men in tactical gear stepped out. Not police, definitely not police. They moved with unnatural speed, surrounding them in a semicircle. Then, the rear door of the lead vehicle opened. A man stepped out. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He unfolded himself from the car with a grace that made the soldiers look clumsy. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Felicity's entire life, tailored to fit broad shoulders and a lean, powerful frame. He held no umbrella, yet the rain seemed to slide off him, unwilling to touch his skin. He walked into the light. His face was a landscape of sharp angles and cold fury, handsome in a way that made your stomach drop. His eyes were the color of steel and storms. He looked at the soldiers, then at Felicity. Or rather, he looked at the bundle in her arms. "Rowena," the man said. His voice was low, a velvet baritone that vibrated in Felicity's chest. The little girl in Felicity's arms lifted her head. "Papa!" Felicity's breath hitched. "Papa!" This terrifying man was the father. The man, Edwin Stormwell, took a step forward, his hand outstretched. But then he stopped. He stared at Felicity's arms, wrapped protectively around the girl's legs. He stared at the way the girl was clinging to the waitress's neck, her face buried in the cheap polyester uniform. The soldiers raised their weapons. Red laser sights dotted Felicity's chest. "Let her go," one of the guards shouted. "Wait," Edwin commanded. The single word silenced the rain. He walked closer until he was just feet away. Felicity could smell him. Ozone, pine, and old blood. He looked down at Felicity, his gaze piercing through her. He looked at the mud on her knees, the exhaustion in her eyes, and the fierce, trembling defiance in the way she held his daughter. "You are carrying her," Edwin said, sounding genuinely baffled. "She is letting you carry her." "She's disabled," Felicity snapped, fear momentarily forgotten in the face of indignation. "She can't walk, and she's freezing. If you're her father, why the hell is she in a dumpster?" The soldiers gasped. No one spoke to the king like that. Edwin's eyes widened slightly. For a second, the storm in his gaze cleared, replaced by a flash of intense curiosity. "She is not disabled," Edwin said softly. "She is broken, and you are touching the royal line." "I'm helping a child," Felicity retorted, though her voice shook. Edwin stepped closer. He reached out, his hand hovering over Felicity's shoulder. "Give her to me." "No," Rowena whimpered. "Papa, it hurts. The ground hurts. Only she feels like a quiet." Edwin froze. He looked from his daughter's pained face to Felicity. A muscle in his jaw ticked. He made a decision that would shatter the foundations of his kingdom. "Harrison," Edwin called out without looking back. "Sir?" The head of security stepped forward. "Open the car door." "Sir, the protocols. The human has seen us. She has touched the princess," The blood law states, "Open the door." Edwin looked at Felicity. "I cannot take her from you without causing her pain. You will carry her into my vehicle. You will come with us." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Felicity stammered. Edwin leaned in, his face inches from hers, his eyes dilated, swallowing the irises. "If you stay here, Leopold's men will find you within the hour, and they will not ask nicely. Get in the car, Felicity." He knew her name. He hadn't asked, but he knew. Felicity looked at the soldiers, the dark alley, and the shivering girl in her arms. She realized she had crossed a line she hadn't even seen. She stepped toward the black car. The interior of the SUV smelled of leather and silence. It was bigger than Felicity's apartment, with tinted windows that turned the passing city into a grey smear. Felicity sat on the plush bench seat, Rowena still curled in her lap. The child had fallen into a fitful sleep the moment the door closed, her breathing shallow. Opposite them sat Edwin Stormwell. He watched them with the intensity of a predator, studying a puzzle. "Who are you?" Felicity asked, her voice small in the quiet cabin. "I am the person who is currently keeping you alive," Edwin replied. He poured a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter built into the console. He didn't offer her any. "Drink this," he commanded, handing it to Rowena, who stirred. "What is it?" Felicity blocked his hand. Edwin's eyes flashed. "Medicine, essential for her constitution. Do not presume to protect my daughter from me, Miss Moreland." Felicity hesitated, then took the glass. It smelled metallic, like iron and pomegranate. She held it to Rowena's lips. The girl drank greedily, a bit of color returning to her pale cheeks. "Better?" Edwin asked the child, his voice softening imperceptibly. "Yes, Papa," Rowena whispered. "My legs, they still sleep." "I know, little star. We are going to the sanctuary." "Why can't she walk?" Felicity asked. She couldn't help herself. The curiosity was a dangerous itch. Edwin looked at Felicity. For a moment, he considered killing her. It would be the lawful thing to do. The blood law was clear. No human shall harbor knowledge of the kin. No human shall touch the blood of the king's heir. By holding Rowena, Felicity had technically contaminated the royal bloodline with her mortality. But Rowena was calm. For months, the wither, a genetic curse passed down by Rowena's late mother, had made human touch agonizing for the girl. Even Edwin's touch sometimes caused her flare-ups of pain. Yet she curled into this waitress like a cat seeking sunlight. "It is a condition of our blood," Edwin said vaguely. "A weakness in the strength. That explains nothing. And you are owed no explanations," Edwin countered smoothly. "You are a liability, Felicity. Do you realize what you have done? You have walked into a war. I picked up a kid from the mud. If that's war, your world is messed up." Edwin let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "You have no idea." The car slowed. They weren't heading toward a hospital or a police station. They were driving out of the city toward the dense, forested hills of the Palisades. "Where are we going?" Felicity demanded, panic rising again. "To a place where Leopold cannot track us." "Who is Leopold?" Edwin looked out the window. "My brother, and the man who wants Rowena dead, so he can take my throne." The word hung in the air. Throne. Felicity stared at him. Your royalty? Like some foreign prince?" "Something like that." Suddenly, the car swerved violently. Tires screeched. Felicity was thrown against the side of the door, shielding Rowena with her body. "Ambush!" Harrison yelled from the front seat. "Sector 4! They knew the route!" Gunfire erupted. Not the pop-pop of handguns, but the heavy thud of high-caliber rounds slamming into the armored chassis. The bulletproof glass spider-webbed, but held. "Get down!" Edwin roared. He moved with a blur of speed that defied physics. One moment he was in his seat. The next, he was shielding both Felicity and Rowena, his body a hard, unyielding wall over them. The car spun 180 degrees. The driver was shouting. "Hold on!" Edwin commanded. The back of the SUV was ripped open, literally torn metal, as something massive slammed into it from the outside. A figure stood in the rain, silhouetted by the headlights of a pursuing vehicle. A man, immense and monstrous, holding the torn metal door like it was cardboard. "Give me the girl, Edwin!" the man roared. His eyes glowed red. Vampires. The realization hit Felicity like a physical blow. The speed, the strength, the talk of blood and thrones. Edwin snarled, a sound that was entirely inhuman. His face shifted, veins darkening under his eyes, fangs lengthening. "Stay here," Edwin ordered Felicity. "Cover her eyes." "You're a—" Felicity couldn't finish the sentence. "A monster," Edwin finished for her. "Yes. Now, do as I say if you want to live." He launched himself out of the broken vehicle. Felicity pressed Rowena's face into her chest, covering the girl's ears. "Don't look, honey, don't look." Outside, the night turned into a slaughter. She heard wet thuds, screams that were cut short, and the screech of tearing metal. It lasted less than a minute. Silence returned, heavy and thick. A hand gripped the edge of the broken door frame. Felicity screamed. It was Edwin. His suit was torn, his white shirt stained with blood that wasn't his. He was wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. He looked at her, his eyes slowly fading from red back to grey. He looked terrifying. He looked magnificent. "The car is compromised," he said, his breathing even, as if he hadn't just dismantled a squad of attackers. "We run from here." "I can't run with her," Felicity said, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "She's heavy." "I will carry her," Edwin said. He reached for Rowena. As soon as his fingers brushed Rowena's arm, the girl screamed in agony. "It burns!" "Papa, no!" Edwin recoiled as if he'd been slapped. He looked at his hands, then at his daughter. The adrenaline of the fight, the proximity to his own violence, it was reacting with the curse. He was too potent, too dark for her right now. He looked at Felicity. The waitress was shaking, terrified of him, yet she hadn't let go of the girl. "I cannot touch her," Edwin said, his voice laced with a despair that broke Felicity's heart despite the horror. "The bloodlust, the adrenaline, it aggravates the wither. If I carry her now, I will kill her." He looked Felicity in the eye. "You have to do it, Felicity. You have to carry my daughter. I will protect you. I will kill anyone who comes near you. But you must be her legs." Felicity looked at the carnage on the road behind him. She looked at the monster offering her a deal. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Edwin nodded. He ripped the door off a nearby abandoned sedan, creating a path. Then run. The safe house was a misnomer. It was a fortress of glass and steel, cantilevered over a rushing river deep in the forest. It looked like a Bond villain's lair designed by an architect with a depression problem. They had run for 3 miles through the woods. Felicity thought her lungs would collapse. Every time she stumbled, Edwin was there, a hand on her elbow, steadying her without grabbing, pulling her up with impossible strength. He moved through the forest like a shadow, eliminating obstacles before she even saw them. Now, inside the sterile, ultra-modern living room, Felicity collapsed onto a white leather sofa. Rowena was asleep again, lying with her head in Felicity's lap. Harrison, who had survived the ambush with a nasty gash on his forehead, was securing the perimeter. Edwin paced the room. He had discarded his ruined jacket. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with faint, silver scars. "You did well," Edwin said. He didn't look at her. He was pouring a drink. Whiskey this time. He downed it in one swallow. "What are you?" Felicity asked. She was too tired to filter her thoughts. "Vampires. You're vampires." Edwin stopped pacing. He turned to face her. "The term is strigoi. But yes, history has given us many names. And Rowena, she is complicated. Her mother was of the high Fae bloodlines. The mix, it was not meant to be. It resulted in the wither. Her body rejects her own magic. And Leopold? My younger brother. He believes a disabled heir weakens the crown. He wants to purify the line." Edwin's grip on the glass tightened until it shattered. Shards rained onto the floor. He didn't flinch. "He sent those men tonight." Felicity looked down at the sleeping girl. "So she's safe here?" "For now." Edwin walked over to them. He knelt. It was a shocking change in posture, the king on his knees. He wasn't kneeling to Felicity, but to the situation. He looked at Rowena, then slowly, hesitantly, raised his eyes to Felicity. "Why doesn't she burn when I touch her?" Felicity asked. "I do not know," Edwin admitted. "Perhaps because you have no magic. You are a void, a neutral space. Or perhaps—" He trailed off. "Perhaps what?" "Perhaps fate is playing a cruel joke." He stood up abruptly. "Harrison will show you to a room. You will stay here until the threat is neutralized." "I have a job. I have bills. I can't just vanish." "Your debts are paid," Edwin said dismissively. "Harrison cleared your mother's medical liens and your student loans 10 minutes ago. You are employed by me now." Felicity stood up, careful not to jostle Rowena. "You can't just buy me." "I can buy your city, Felicity. Buying your time is trivial." "I'm not for sale." Edwin stepped into her personal space. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. "Everyone is for sale. The price is just different. Your price is safety, not yours, hers." He nodded at Rowena. "You care about her. I saw it in the alley. You possess a dangerous amount of empathy. She's a child. She is a target, and right now, you are the only one who can hold her without causing her agony. So you will stay. You will be her caretaker. You will be her legs until I find a cure. And if I say no, then I will wipe your memory, dump you back at the diner, and you will spend the rest of your life wondering why you feel like you've lost something vital. And Rowena will likely die of cold or pain within the week." It was manipulation, cruel, calculated manipulation, and it worked perfectly. Felicity looked at Rowena's sleeping face. She remembered the way the girl had clung to her. She remembered the red eyes of the attacker in the woods. "I need a uniform that isn't polyester," Felicity said. A ghost of a smile touched Edwin's lips. It didn't reach his eyes, but it softened the terrifying planes of his face. "I believe we can arrange for silk, and I want to call my roommate. Tell her I'm okay. Text only, monitored." "Fine." Edwin turned to leave the room. "Wait," Felicity said. He paused at the glass doors. "The blood law," she said, recalling the guard's words. "You broke it for me." "Why?" Edwin didn't turn around. He looked at his reflection in the glass, seeing the monster he was and the father he tried to be. "Because," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "a king who follows the law but loses his heart is no king at all. He is just a ruler of graves." He walked out, leaving Felicity alone in the glass cage, holding the weight of a kingdom in her lap. Outside, in the shadows of the trees, a figure watched the house. Lucinda Crestford lowered her binoculars, her lips curving into a smile that was all teeth. "Found you," she whispered into her phone. "And he brought a pet. How? Delicious." She dialed a number. Leopold, prepare the circle. The king has brought a human into the fold. The blood law is broken. We can finally move. The days in the glass fortress passed in a blur of grey mist and silent tension. The forest outside was a wall of pine and suspicion, but inside, the air was heavy with unspoken words. Felicity had fallen into a rhythm she hadn't expected. Mornings were for Rowena. The child was a voracious reader, devouring books from the library with an intensity that matched her father's. Felicity would sit by the window, brushing Rowena's silver hair, careful not to let her fingers graze the girl's skin unless necessary. When she did have to lift her, for baths, for meals, to move from chair to bed, Rowena would tense, bracing for pain that never came. "It is the strangest magic," Harrison Valecrest murmured one afternoon, watching Felicity carry Rowena to the garden terrace. "To be a nullifier, I have not seen it in centuries." "I'm just a waitress, Harrison," Felicity said, settling Rowena onto a chaise lounge. "I'm not magic. In our world, Miss Moreland, the absence of something is often more powerful than its presence." Edwin was a ghost in his own house. He spent hours in the basement levels. The war room, Harrison called it. When he emerged, he looked drawn, his skin the color of parchment. He avoided Felicity, speaking only in curt commands regarding Rowena's schedule or security protocols. But at night, the dynamic shifted. It was 3 a.m. Felicity, unable to sleep in the silence that was so different from the city's hum, wandered into the kitchen. She found Edwin there, leaning against the marble island, staring at a glass of red liquid. He wasn't drinking it. He was enduring it. "You look terrible," Felicity said, the words slipping out before she could check them. Edwin looked up. His eyes were dark, the irises swallowed by black. "Flattery is not part of your job description." "Is that blood?" "Synthetic," he said, pushing the glass away with a look of distaste. "A compound created by my chemists. It sustains, but it does not satisfy. Why don't you—" Felicity hesitated. "Do the real thing." "Hunt?" Edwin laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "Because, Felicity, the strength I gain from human blood comes with a price. It heightens the senses, it sharpens the predator, and right now, my daughter needs a father, not a beast who can smell the pulse in her neck from 3 rooms away." He was starving himself. For Rowena. Felicity walked closer. The fear that had paralyzed her in the alley was receding, replaced by a strange, magnetic pull. "You're weakening yourself. If Leopold comes, I will tear him apart with my bare hands, starved or not." "You're shaking," she pointed out softly. Edwin looked at his hand. A fine tremor ran through his fingers. He clenched his fist to hide it. "Go to bed, Felicity." "No." She reached out, placing her hand over his clenched fist. She expected him to pull away. She expected the coldness of marble. Instead, his skin burned. A shockwave went through him at her touch, his eyes snapping to hers. He didn't recoil. He leaned into it, just a fraction. "You are warm," he whispered, sounding bewildered. "Why does everyone else feel like ice compared to you?" "Maybe you've just been cold for a long time." For a moment, the distance between them vanished. He was just a man exhausted by the weight of a crown, and she was the woman holding him up. The air crackled with a different kind of hunger, not for blood, but for connection. Then, the security alarm blared. Red lights bathed the kitchen. Harrison's voice boomed over the intercom. "Perimeter breach! South quadrant! Drones!" Edwin's demeanor snapped from vulnerable to lethal in a nanosecond. He was moving before the siren finished its first cycle. "Get to Rowena!" he roared. But as Felicity turned to run, she saw something on the counter where Edwin had been standing. A dossier, For der Busse, it had slid open. There was a photograph clipped to the front, a grainy, black and white image of a woman. It was Felicity's mother, and underneath, stamped in red ink. Subject: Project Genesis. Status: terminated. Felicity stared at the photo, the alarm screaming in her ears. The man protecting her wasn't just a king. He was a keeper of secrets, and one of them belonged to her. The attack had been a probe. Drones sent to test their defenses. They were destroyed easily, but the location was compromised. "We cannot stay," Edwin announced the next morning. He was back in his armor of cold indifference, but Felicity watched him with new eyes. Suspicion warred with the memory of his hand under hers. "Where do we go?" Harrison asked. "The safe houses are known. The sanctuary is too far." "We hide in plain sight," Edwin said. He threw a heavy envelope onto the table. "The Winter Solstice Gala at the Obsidian Court. Tonight." Harrison paled. "My liege, that is suicide. The entire council will be there, including Leopold." "Exactly. Leopold expects me to run. He expects me to be cowering in a bunker. He will not expect me to walk through the front door of the most public event of the season." Edwin turned to Felicity. "And you are coming with me?" "Me?" Felicity choked on her coffee. "I'm a human waitress. You said humans aren't allowed." "They are allowed as companions," Edwin said, the word heavy with implication. "You will be my guest. My pet, as the court will see it. It is the only way to keep you close to Rowena, without raising questions about her condition. If they see you holding her, they must think, it is because I commanded it, not because she needs it. And Rowena? She will attend. She must show strength. If the court sees she is weak, they will back Leopold." The preparation was a fever dream. A team of silent stylists arrived. How? Felicity didn't ask. They scrubbed the diner grease from her skin and dressed her in a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged every curve and flared at the bottom like a storm cloud. Diamonds were fastened around her throat. Cold, heavy things. When she walked into the living room, Edwin stopped dead. He was wearing a tuxedo of severe black, a crimson sash across his chest. He looked every inch the vampire monarch, beautiful, terrifying, and utterly remote, but his eyes raked over her with a heat that wasn't remote at all. "You look," he cleared his throat, "adequate. The disguise will hold." "It's not a disguise," Felicity muttered, tugging at the neckline. "It's a costume." The Obsidian Court was held in an underground cathedral beneath the city's financial district. The architecture was Gothic madness, soaring arches, black stone, and thousands of candles floating in the air by some unseen magic. The room went silent when they entered. Hundreds of faces turned. Beautiful, ageless faces, eyes that glittered with malice and hunger. Edwin offered Felicity his arm. "Do not let go," he whispered, "and do not bleed. If you get so much as a paper cut in here, I will have to slaughter half the room to get you out." "Reassuring," she whispered back, gripping his bicep. They walked through the parting crowd. Rowena was carried by Felicity, dressed in a matching velvet cloak, her face buried in Felicity's shoulder. To the onlookers, it looked like a possessive display, the king's human servant carrying the heir. "Brother," a voice purred. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Leopold stood at the foot of the dais. He was the mirror image of Edwin. But where Edwin was steel and storm, Leopold was gold and rot. He was blonde, smiling, and radiated a charm that made Felicity's skin crawl. Lucinda Crestford hung on his arm, looking like a viper in red silk. "Leopold," Edwin nodded, his voice bored. "I heard you had trouble on the road," Leopold said, his eyes flicking to Rowena. "Is the little princess tired?" She's weary of your games, brother, Edwin said. As am I. And who is this? Leopold stepped closer to Felicity. He sniffed the air. Delicious. And familiar. He reached out to touch Felicity's face. Edwin's hand shot out, intercepting Leopold's wrist. The crack of impact echoed through the hall. Touch her, Edwin said, his voice dropping to a subsonic growl that vibrated the wine glasses. And I will remove the hand. Protective, Leopold laughed, pulling back. She must be special. Does she know about her mother yet, Edwin? Does she know why her blood smells so specific? Felicity froze. The dossier. Project Genesis. Edwin stiffened. We are leaving. The music is just starting. Leopold signaled the orchestra. A waltz began, haunting and discordant. Dance with me, brother. Let us show the court we are united. I do not dance with traitors. Then let her dance, Leopold pointed to Felicity. Unless you are afraid she cannot keep up? To refuse would be to show fear. Edwin looked at Felicity. Can you waltz? I took a class in junior high, she whispered, terrified. Good enough. Follow my lead. Edwin swept her onto the floor. He didn't dance. He glided. He held her close, his hand burning on her waist. What did he mean about my mother? Felicity hissed as he spun her. Not here, Edwin warned. Tell me. Project Genesis. I saw the file. Edwin missed a step. It was microscopic, but for a vampire, it was a stumble. He looked down at her, pain warring with resolve. Your mother was not just a nurse, Felicity. She was a donor, a willing participant in a program to create a bloodline compatible with the royal curse. To cure the wither. She worked for you? She died for us, Edwin corrected. The experiment failed. It drained her life force. I tried to save her. I failed. That is why I paid your debts. That is why I found you. I owe you a life. Felicity felt the room spin. You killed her. I tried to save the world, Edwin said, his eyes pleading, and I lost my soul doing it. Suddenly the lights went out. The darkness was absolute. Then, chaos. Screams erupted from the crowd. The smell of smoke, acrid and magical, filled the air. Rowena! Edwin shouted, releasing Felicity to lunge for his daughter, who was sitting on a velvet bench nearby with Harrison. But they were gone. A spotlight snapped on, blindingly bright, centered on the high balcony overlooking the ballroom. Leopold stood there. He was holding Rowena by the scruff of her neck, her legs dangling uselessly. She was screaming, a high, thin sound that shattered glass across the room. The king is weak! Leopold's voice was amplified by magic. He brings humans into our sanctum. He harbors a broken heir. He hides the truth of our decline. He dangled Rowena over the railing. It was a 50-foot drop to the stone floor. Let her go! Felicity screamed, pushing through the panicked crowd. Ah, the pet speaks! Leopold sneered. Let us see if the king can catch. He dropped her. Time seemed to stretch. Felicity saw Rowena falling, her silver hair streaming like a comet. She saw Edwin moving, blurring into mist to reach her. But he was too far. The crowd of vampires blocked him, a wall of bodies. Felicity didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just ran. She wasn't fast enough to catch her. No human was. But as Rowena plummeted, Felicity felt that surge of static again, the same one she felt when holding the girl. She reached out, screaming Rowena's name. Stop! The word didn't come from her throat. It came from her blood. A pulse of visible energy, pure white light, erupted from Felicity's chest. It slammed into Rowena mid-air, not hurting her, but holding her. Rowena stopped falling. She hovered, suspended in a bubble of white force, 3 feet above the ground. The ballroom went deathly silent. Edwin froze, staring at Felicity. Leopold leaned over the balcony, his smirk vanishing into a mask of shock. "A nullifier," Harrison whispered from the shadows. "A true nullifier." Felicity fell to her knees, the energy draining her instantly. The bubble popped, and Rowena dropped gently to the floor. Safe. "Kill the human!" Lucinda shrieked from the balcony. "She is a witch!" Guards, Leopold's loyalists, drew swords and guns, descending on Felicity. She was too weak to move. She looked up, watching the blades come down. Then, a shadow eclipsed her. Edwin stood over her. But he wasn't the man she knew. He had fully transformed. His skin was obsidian hard, his eyes burning red suns, wings of shadow unfurling from his back. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a god of death. "She," Edwin's voice was a tectonic rumble, "is mine." He unleashed a wave of darkness that threw 50 vampires across the room like rag dolls. He scooped Felicity up in one arm and Rowena in the other. "Harrison, the breach!" Harrison blew the charges on the east wall. Stone exploded inward. The winter wind howled into the ballroom, bringing snow and freedom. Edwin launched himself into the night, carrying the two women who were now the most hunted beings on Earth. They landed miles away, in a snowy clearing deep in the mountains. Edwin collapsed, reverting to his human form, gasping for air. The use of such power had drained him. Felicity crawled over to him in the snow, her velvet dress ruined, her diamonds gone. "You saved us," she whispered. Edwin looked at her, then at his shaking hands. He looked at Rowena, who was shivering but alive. "And you," Edwin rasped, looking at Felicity with a mixture of awe and terror. "You just started a revolution." He reached out, touching a snowflake melting on her cheek. "My brother wanted to expose a weakness," Edwin said, a dark smile finally touching his lips. "Instead, he revealed our greatest weapon." Felicity looked at her hands. They were trembling, faint sparks of white light still dancing under the skin. "I'm not a waitress anymore, am I?" "No," Edwin said, pulling her and Rowena into his arms as the snow buried them. "You are the storm." From the distance, the bells of the Obsidian court tolled. The war had officially begun. They found refuge in the ruins of an ancient monastery, high in the peaks where the air was thin and the snow deep enough to bury secrets. It was a place forgotten by time, and for a few days it was the only world that existed. Felicity sat by a crackling fire in what used to be the nave. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of tea Harrison had scavenged, but she couldn't stop staring at her palms. Every now and then, a spark of white static would jump between her fingers, a reminder of the power that had slept in her blood for 24 years. "It frightens you," Edwin's voice came from the shadows. He stepped into the firelight. He looked rugged, the polished veneer of the king stripped away to reveal the warrior beneath. He wore a heavy wool sweater and dark trousers, looking more human than she had ever seen him, yet infinitely more dangerous. "My mother died because of this," Felicity said, not looking up. "Because you tried to put this thing into a bloodline." "She died because I was arrogant," Edwin said, sitting on the stone floor opposite her. He didn't try to touch her. "I thought science could outsmart an ancient curse. I was wrong. The project didn't kill her, Felicity. The rejection did. Her body couldn't hold the magic. Yours absorbs it. You are the perfect vessel. I don't want to be a vessel. I just want to be Felicity." "You are," he said intensely. "You are the woman who carried my daughter when I was too weak to do it myself. That is not magic. That is soul." He reached out, slowly, giving her ample time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. This time there was no static, just warmth, a profound, anchoring heat that traveled up her arm and settled in her chest. "Leopold will come," Edwin said quietly. The blood moon rises tomorrow. It is the height of his power. He will track the magical residue of your outburst at the gala. Let him come, Felicity whispered, surprised by her own anger. He hurt Rowena. I want him to come. Edwin's eyes darkened. He pulled her closer until her knees brushed his. You have the heart of a queen, Felicity Moorland, but I cannot let you fight my battles. It's our battle now, she said. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the centuries of loneliness, the desperate love for his daughter, the guilt that ate him alive. You said you owed me a life. I don't want a life, Edwin. I want a future. Edwin made a sound, half groan, half growl, and leaned in. I am a monster, he warned, his lips inches from hers. I will never be safe. I'm not looking for safe, Felicity breathed. I'm looking for real. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was the crash of waves against a cliff, a release of tension that had been building since that first moment in the rain-slicked alley. He kissed her like a starving man tasting bread, and Felicity kissed him back with all the fire of the storm he had named her after. In the corner of the ruin, wrapped in blankets, Rowena watched them with sleepy, violet eyes. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the ache in her bones, the static in the air. It felt like a lullaby. The attack didn't begin with a shout, but with a silence so profound it hurt the ears. The birds stopped singing. The wind died. They are here, Harrison said, racking the slide of a heavy assault rifle. He stood at the crumbling archway of the monastery. Edwin stood in the center of the courtyard, his sword drawn, a blade of black metal that seemed to drink the light. Felicity stood behind him, Rowena clutching her hand. Stay behind me, Edwin commanded. No, Felicity said. She stepped up beside him. If I'm the weapon, you have to let me fire. The fog rolled in, thick and unnatural. Out of the mist walked Leopold. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood the elite guard of the Obsidian court, 50 vampires in full tactical gear, and beside him, Lucinda, smiling like a cat who had cornered a mouse. So domestic, Leopold sneered, stepping over a fallen gargoyle. The king in his ruins, with his broken child and his human witch. It's almost poetic, brother. I shall have it painted for the throne room after I kill you. You talk too much, Edwin said calmly. And you rule too softly, Leopold roared. Attack! The courtyard exploded into violence. Vampires moved as blurs, faster than the eye could track. Harrison opened fire, his bullets tipped with UV incendiaries that turned attackers to ash. Edwin was a whirlwind of black steel, decapitating 2 guards in a single, fluid motion. But there were too many of them. Leopold bypassed the fray, launching himself straight at Felicity and Rowena. Felicity! Edwin shouted, engaged with 3 attackers. Leopold landed before them, his face contorted into a vampiric visage of fangs and veins. He backhanded Felicity, sending her sprawling into the snow. No! Rowena screamed. Leopold grabbed Rowena by the throat, lifting her off the ground. This ends now. The weak link breaks. Felicity looked up, wiping blood from her lip. She saw the fear in Rowena's eyes. She saw Edwin, pinned down, screaming his daughter's name. Something inside Felicity snapped. Not a bone, but a barrier. She didn't just feel the static. She became it. Put, Felicity said, standing up. Her voice echoed, layered with a resonance that shook the stones. Her. Down. She thrust both hands forward. A shockwave of null energy exploded outward. It wasn't a bubble this time. It was a tsunami. It washed over the courtyard, passing through Harrison and Rowena harmlessly, but hitting the vampires like a physical wall. The effect was instantaneous. The vampires screamed as their speed vanished. Their strength evaporated. The magic that knit their undead bodies together unraveled. For a terrifying moment, they were just corpses standing up. Leopold dropped Rowena. He fell to his knees, gasping, clutching his chest. His skin turned grey, his fangs retracting painfully. He looked up at Felicity, his eyes wide with a terror he had never known. What are you?" he wheezed. "I'm the cure," Felicity said coldly. Edwin, unaffected by the blast thanks to his proximity to Felicity's heart over the last few weeks, or perhaps simply because she willed it, stayed forward. He looked at his brother, who was now shivering in the snow, weak and pathetic. "You wanted to purify the line," Edwin said, raising his black sword. "You wanted strength." "Brother, please," Leopold begged, holding up a shaking hand. "We are blood." "Yes," Edwin said, "and blood can be spilled." He didn't kill him. That would be mercy. "Take him," Edwin commanded the surviving guards, who were slowly regaining their senses, but had lost their will to fight after seeing their leader broken by a human. "Throw him in the deepest cell of the citadel. Let him live a long, human life in the dark." Edwin turned to Felicity. The white glow was fading from her skin. She swayed, exhausted. He caught her before she hit the ground. "I got him," she mumbled into his chest. "Yes." Edwin kissed the top of her head, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "You got him." The coronation of the new era did not take place in a dark subterranean cathedral, but in the sprawling gardens of the Stormwell estate. For the first time in centuries, the vampires of the Obsidian court gathered not under the cover of night, but beneath the audacity of the midday sun. It was a feat of magic and technology, a massive, shimmering dome of polarized glass and shadow wards erected over the grounds, filtering the deadly UV rays into a harmless, golden haze. It was Edwin's statement to his people. We are no longer creatures of the dark. We are evolving. It had been 3 months since the siege. The Obsidian court had been purged of Leopold's loyalists, the cells of the citadel now full of those who had chosen cruelty over survival. But the air was still thick with tension. The remaining aristocrats, dressed in silks that shimmered like beetle wings, whispered behind their fans, their eyes darting toward the balcony where Felicity stood. Felicity gripped the marble railing. She wore a dress of cream and gold, a stark departure from the Waitress uniform she had worn just a season ago. But beneath the silk, she was still the girl who had cleaned tables to pay off debts. Only now, the debt she carried was the weight of a kingdom's hope. Below her, in the center of the garden maze, a miracle was happening. Rowena was running. Not the hesitant, pained shuffle of a child whose bones felt like glass, but a true, joyful sprint. She was chasing a golden retriever puppy Edwin had gifted her, her laughter ringing out like a bell, a sound so pure it seemed to cut through the murmured politics of the court. "She looks happy," Harrison said, coming to stand beside Felicity. He wore a new role now, not just head of security, but Lord Chancellor. His scars were healing, but his eyes remained vigilant. "She is happy," Felicity smiled, her heart swelling as she watched Rowena trip, fall into the grass, and simply bounce back up without a scream of agony. "She's finally just a kid, Harrison. That's all I ever wanted for her." "And you?" Harrison asked, turning to study her profile. "Are you happy, Felicity? It is a heavy crown to wear, even if you are not the one wearing it. They call you the anchor now. The court believes you are the only thing keeping the king's beast in check." "I'm not wearing a crown, Harrison. I'm just wearing a very expensive dress that I'm terrified of spilling wine on." She laughed, but it was soft. "And I don't keep the beast in check. I just remind the man that he exists." Harrison bowed his head, a gesture of genuine respect. "The council is terrified of you, you know. A human who can nullify a vampire simply by willing it? You have shifted the balance of power more than any army. Good! A deep voice rumbled from the shadows of the archway. Let them be terrified. Fear breeds caution, and caution prevents treason. Edwin stepped into the filtered sunlight. He looked breathtaking. The months of peace, and perhaps Felicity's presence, had softened the harsh lines of starvation around his eyes. He looked less like a marble statue, and more like a living thing. He wore a ceremonial tunic of slate grey, no weapons in sight, though Felicity knew he was never truly unarmed. He moved to Felicity, his presence wrapping around her like a warm cloak. He didn't care who was watching. He placed a hand on the small of her back, sending that familiar, comforting heat through her spine. "They are waiting for the speech," Edwin murmured against her hair. "The repeal of the blood law has caused quite the stir. Half the court thinks I've gone mad. The other half thinks I've ascended to godhood." Felicity turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Repealing the blood law. Edwin, that's dangerous. Allowing humans to know, to intermingle without fear. The traditionalists will say you're destroying the culture." "Let them," he said, his voice firm, vibrating against her chest. "The old culture was a cage. It created men like Leopold. It created a world where my daughter had to be hidden in a dumpster to survive. I am done with cages, Felicity." He looked down at the garden, watching Rowena catch the puppy and bury her face in its fur. "I have the strongest weapon in the world on my side," he said, looking back at her, "and I have a reason to change. A king who rules by fear creates enemies. A king who rules with love creates a legacy." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the pulse point of her wrist, a pulse he now protected more fiercely than his own throne. "Felicity Moreland," he said softly, ignoring the hundreds of vampiric eyes turning upward to watch them. "You found us in the rain when the world had turned its back. You carried us through the fire when I was too weak to stand. You didn't just save my daughter's life. You saved my soul." He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small velvet box. Felicity's breath hitched. "Edwin." "This is not a command from the king," he said, opening the box. Inside sat a ring unlike anything she had ever seen. It wasn't a cold diamond. It was a band of woven silver and meteoric iron, set with a shifting, opalescent stone that seemed to hold a storm inside it, mirroring the static that lived in her veins. "It is a plea from a man," Edwin continued, his eyes shining with an emotion vampires weren't supposed to feel. "Marry me. Not to be my queen, but to be my equal, my partner, my light." Tears pricked Felicity's eyes, blurring the golden garden below. She thought of the diner, the smell of stale coffee, the loneliness that had eaten at her for years. She looked at the monster who had become her home. "Is this going to be part of the official decree?" she teased, though her voice trembled. "It is the only part of the decree that matters," Edwin smiled, a true, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "Then yes," Felicity whispered, pulling him down for a kiss that defied every law the court had ever written. 1,000 times, yes. Below them, the crowd erupted, not in polite applause, but in a roar of genuine shock and, slowly, celebration. And in the center of the garden, Rowena looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun. She saw her father kissing the woman who had become her mother, and she smiled. She picked a white rose from the bush, held it up to the light, and for the first time in history, the flower didn't wither in a vampire's grip. It bloomed. The legends of the Obsidian court say that the king was the strongest of his line, a warrior who could sever heads with a single stroke. But history remembers the truth. The king was only the vessel. The true power was the waitress who taught a monster how to love, and in doing so, turned a kingdom of eternal night into a dawn that never ended. They didn't just break the curse. They rewrote the definition of family, proving that blood is not what binds us. Love is the only law that matters. If you enjoyed this story of forbidden love, high stakes, and finding light in the darkest places, please like this story, share it with your fellow romantics, and subscribe for more tales of destiny and desire. What would you do if you found a vampire princess in an alley? Let me know in the comments.